Some of the greatest forage harvesters ever built are rotting in hedgerows right now, and almost nobody remembers their names. In the 1980s, these machines could swallow a whole field of maize before breakfast and fire at 40 tons an hour into a trailer. Then the decade ended, the badges disappeared, and the world moved on. But here's the thing the manufacturers never told you. Some of them were smarter than the machines you're running today. Let's bring them back. Number 10. The JF Precision Chop Trailed Harvesters. We're starting with a machine most people forgot on purpose, because by the 1980s the trailed harvester was supposed to be old news. Denmark's JF didn't get the memo. While everyone was chasing self-propelled horsepower, JF kept building precision chop trailed forages with one very distinctive feature: an upward-cutting multi-knife chopping cylinder that fed the crop up and over rather than the usual arrangement. Their 1980s range, machines like the FC80 and FCT110 you'll still find in old brochures, was clever in a way that made a lot of sense on smaller farms. You didn't need to sink the price of a house into a self-propelled machine. You bolted a JF onto the back of a tractor you already owned, and you got precision chopping quality that rivaled the big boys at a fraction of the cost. That's the part that gets forgotten. Everyone remembers the roaring self-propelled machines, but the trailed forager gave the smaller operator something priceless: independence. You cut your own grass on your own day when the weather was right, instead of waiting on a contractor who'd turn up whenever the big farms were done. JF understood that need and engineered for it, keeping their transmissions simple and their feed intakes powerful. The brilliance here isn't drama. It's the fact that JF kept refining a machine everyone assumed was obsolete, and they were proven right because trailed precision chop harvesters are still made and sold today. In the 1980s, while flashier machines grabbed the headlines, JF was quietly building the most cost-effective way to make quality silage in Europe. Forgotten? Absolutely. Brilliant? Without a doubt. Number 9. The Deutz-Fahr Gigant 400. Now to a machine so rare that most farmers today have never even seen a photograph of one. The Deutz-Fahr Gigant 400. Here's what makes it special. It was one of the very first forage harvesters ever built with hydraulically driven harvesting headers. A genuinely forward-thinking idea at a time when almost everything was still driven mechanically by belts, chains, and shafts. It even had a proper work platform built in between the corn cracker and the engine, easily accessed from the right-hand side, so a mechanic could actually get at the machine to service it. Little touches like that told you engineers who understood fieldwork had a hand in it. There's a lovely bit of behind-the-scenes history too. Deutz-Fahr didn't build the whole thing from scratch. The base vehicle was actually bought in from Mengele, while Deutz-Fahr built the chopping unit and the grass and corn headers themselves. Every self-propelled Fahr harvester ran on Deutz engines with a hydrostatic drive. It was a smart bit of collaboration that let them get a capable machine to market without reinventing every single component. So why is it forgotten? Because only around 150 Gigant 400s were ever built. A successor, the Gigant 500, was actually developed, but its prototype fell victim to cost-cutting after the parent company changed hands. The Gigant died young. But think about what that means. A machine that pioneered hydraulic header drive, built in tiny numbers, then killed off before it could go mainstream. If it had survived, hydraulic drives might have arrived years earlier across the whole industry. The Gigant 400 was a glimpse of the future that almost nobody got to see. That's exactly why it belongs on this list. Number 8. The Coering Fox. Time for a name that once meant everything in American forage, and now means almost nothing. Fox. The Fox River Tractor Company of Appleton, Wisconsin, was a genuine pioneer. Their roots go all the way back to research in the 1920s, and they built their first self-propelled forage harvester in 1960, putting them among the earliest anywhere in the world to do it. By the time the 1980s rolled around, the Coering Fox 3000 pull type had a reputation as one of the premier trailed forage harvesters used by grain and dairy farmers right across the United States, and their self-propelled machines, like the four-wheel drive Max 2 running a big Detroit diesel, were tough, well-built units that farmers trusted. Ask anyone who ran one, and you'll hear the same thing. Fox knew forage harvesting inside out. These were reliable, over-engineered machines that kept working for decades. The problem was never the product. It was the business. Here's the sad part. Coering sold the Fox line to Piper Industries in 1981. 5 years later, in 1986, Piper offloaded it again to the Hinneke Company, and production of Fox forage harvesters in Appleton simply stopped. By then, most farmers were buying green, red, or yellow, John Deere International or New Holland, and a specialist shortline company just couldn't survive in a shrinking market during the brutal farm economy of the 1980s, so Fox vanished. But the machines didn't. Plenty of those old Fox choppers kept cutting for years afterward, and restored examples still turn heads at vintage shows. It's a genuinely brilliant, all-American engineering story that got squeezed out not by bad design, but by bad timing. The Fox deserves to be remembered. Number 7. The Mengele SF300. This next one might be the most unusual machine on the entire list, and it's a masterclass in doing more with less. The Mengele SF300 from southern Germany faced the same problem every trailed harvester maker faced in the 1980s. The self-propelled machine was eating their lunch. Their answer was wonderfully creative. Instead of building a fully integrated ground-up self-propelled forager to compete with the giants, Mengele built what was really a self-propelled power unit, a compact drivable base to which a harvester could be mated. That was the SF300. It made just 150 horsepower, at a time when the big self-propelled machines were pushing 300 to 400. On paper, it looks hopelessly outgunned. But that was the whole point, because it wasn't a fully bespoke machine. It was far cheaper to produce and to buy. It was typically paired with the company's own SH40N chopper, run in a reverse drive configuration, giving a smaller farmer a self-propelled capability they could actually afford. And here's the detail I love. To keep costs sensible, Mengele raided the parts bin of the combine harvester world, borrowing running gear from the Claas Senator 80 combine. That's proper resourceful engineering, using proven available components rather than tooling up expensive new ones. The SF300 will never be remembered as a powerhouse. It wasn't trying to be. It was trying to bring self-propelled forage harvesting down to a price and scale that ordinary farms could reach. And it did exactly that. In an era obsessed with ever bigger horsepower, Mengele zigged while everyone else zagged. That kind of clever, humble, right-sized thinking is genuinely brilliant and almost completely forgotten today. Number 6. The Mengele Mammut. Mengele earns a second spot, because when they did decide to build something big, they built the Mammut. And the name was no accident. The Mammut series, including machines like the 6300 and the 6800, were Mengele's proper self-propelled forages, and they earned a loyal, devoted following among contractors who ran them hard. In blue Mengele livery, working grass on heavy ground, a Mammut was a serious piece of kit. These were robust, capable machines that could hold their own against anything from the bigger-name manufacturers, and plenty of them stayed in work long after the 80s were over. What's fascinating about the Mammut is how far its DNA traveled. Mengele's forager engineering was respected enough that when Case IH later wanted to enter the top of the self-propelled market, the machine they developed, the mighty Mammut 8790, grew directly out of this lineage. That later machine, launched at the very end of the 1990s with a 16-liter Deutz-Fahr 8 producing 544 horsepower, was briefly the most powerful self-propelled forage harvester in the world. And it carried the Mammut name and even the distinctive ejection chute that traced right back to those German-built machines of the 80s. So when you look at a Mengele Mammut of the 1980s, you're not looking at a dead end. You're looking at the ancestor of a machine that eventually claimed a world crown. The brilliance of the Mammut was that Mengele, a company most people associate with trailed equipment, proved it could build a big self-propelled forager, good enough to leave a genuine mark on the industry. That legacy has been quietly forgotten, and it shouldn't be. Number 5. The Fiatagri Heston 7725. Now we come to a machine that Irish and British contractors absolutely adored, even if the wider world has largely forgotten it. The Fiatagri Heston 7725. The story behind it is brilliant on its own. This machine descended directly from the legendary American Field Queen, and it was actually designed and built in France at the old combine factory at Coex, with input from a former Field Queen engineer. Fiat, which had taken a stake in Heston back in 1977, put it into production, And where the earlier French-built attempt had struggled, the 7725 and its bigger brother, the 7735, got it right. The genius of these machines was serviceability. The combined pickup and chopping mechanism was designed as a single unit that could be dropped off the machine in under a minute. Think about what that meant on a wet, miserable silage day. If you blocked the drum or needed to get at the flywheel blower to clear a jam or do maintenance, you weren't spending half a day with spanners and skinned knuckles. You dropped the whole front unit off and had complete open access in seconds. For a contractor whose entire income depended on keeping the machine running, that was worth a fortune. They were popular for good reason. One Cork contractor paid £82,000 for a 7725 in 1988, serious money, and stayed loyal to the brand for years. Owners praised how quick and cheap they were to keep going compared to rivals. Some of these machines are now well into their fourth decade and still out cutting grass. The Fiatagri Heston 7725 wasn't the biggest or the flashiest, but it was clever where it counted, built to be fixed in a field by real people under real pressure. That's engineering that respects the operator, and it's exactly the kind of brilliance that gets forgotten once the badges disappear. Number 4. The Field Queen. You can't tell the story of the machine we just covered without paying proper respect to its ancestor. And honestly, the Field Queen deserves its own place on this list. This is the mother of them all. Field Queen, built in Kansas, had been making self-propelled forage harvesters since around 1950. That's a full generation before John Deere, Claas, or New Holland got serious about the idea. By the early 1970s, this American company was already offering a machine of 200 horsepower, developed in conjunction with Heston at a time when European rivals were still finding their feet. It was originally created to harvest alfalfa across America's Midwest, and it was powered first by a 200 horsepower Caterpillar, later with the option of a monstrous 257 horsepower Detroit diesel two-stroke. Now, why does a machine with 1950s origins belong on a list about the 1980s? Because its ideas refused to die. In 1983, Heston launched a clean-sheet successor to the old Field Queen format, an articulated four-wheel drive machine that still carried one of the Field Queen's boldest concepts, an optional collection tank for the grass. That tank meant the harvester could keep chopping while trailers were being swapped alongside it, exactly the way a combine harvester keeps threshing while it unloads. Think about how far ahead of its time that was. Continuous, uninterrupted harvesting is something the industry chased for decades. The Field Queen had a version of it, arguably before the market was ready to appreciate it. The concept was heavy and expensive and eventually dropped, but the vision was spot on. The Field Queen was the true pioneer, the machine whose DNA fed straight into the Heston foragers that European contractors loved. It's a genuine legend, and outside of a small circle of enthusiasts, it's been almost completely forgotten. Correcting that is exactly why this video exists. Number 3. The John Deere 5830. Now we're into the machines that were famous in their day and are only forgotten in the sense that the young operators running today's harvesters have never seen one work. First up, the John Deere 5830. Deere had been building self-propelled foragers since 1972. But the 5830 of the 1980s, built in Ottumwa, Iowa, was the machine that really established the brand in the silage world. Right at the time, John Deere as a whole was breaking through into markets like Ireland, where their machines had previously been a rare sight. For a lot of farmers, a shiny 5830 parked at a plowing match was the first serious self-propelled Deere forager they'd ever laid eyes on. But here's the genuinely important, genuinely brilliant part, and it's a piece of history that gets overlooked. It was on self-propelled machines of this era that John Deere pioneered the kernel processor for corn silage. The idea was simple but transformative. Crack open the corn kernels as the crop passed through, because an uncracked kernel largely passes straight through the animal and is wasted. Cracking them dramatically improved how much nutrition livestock could actually absorb. Kernel processing gained real traction in the mid-1980s on machines like the 5730 and 5830, and today, kernel processors are standard equipment on virtually every serious forage harvester on Earth. That started here. The 5830 wasn't perfect. It had a notorious undercab auger system that moved the crop from the drum to the blower. which drivers nicknamed the coffin box, because if it blocked, digging it out was a nightmare. But even with that flaw, this was a landmark machine that introduced a technology the entire industry now takes for granted. The badge is still around. The 5830 itself is fading from memory. It shouldn't be. Number 2. The New Holland 1900, almost at the top now, and it's time for a machine that became pure folklore among a certain generation of contractors. The gleaming yellow New Holland 1900, built from 1980 right through to 1988. The 1900 was the machine that cemented New Holland as a genuine force in the silage harvesting world. And these were serious pieces of engineering. They ran on rugged Caterpillar diesel power. You'll find Cat engines like the 3306 in them, pushing around 270 horsepower, with the drive axle at the front and rear wheel steering, the layout that became the template for how self-propelled foragers are still built today. But it's not the spec sheet that people remember, it's the sight of them. Picture a bright yellow New Holland 1900 tearing across a field, with a clatter of blue Ford tractors and trailers chasing after it to catch the crop. For farmers across Ireland and Britain especially, that image is burned into memory. These machines became part of what one writer beautifully called forager folklore. They were the beasts that made Silage Day feel like an event. The 1900 was so successful, it spawned a whole family. It was updated into the 1905, and the range grew upward through bigger models until it topped out with flagship machines like the 2305 and 2405, the biggest, most powerful yellow foragers New Holland offered in that era. Now, in fairness, the 1900 isn't exactly obscure among enthusiasts, but out in the working world, it's been swept aside, replaced first by New Holland's own FX series in the mid-90s, and long since overtaken by machines with 2, 3, even 4 times the power. A whole generation of operators has grown up never hearing a cat-powered 1900 at full song, and that honestly is a shame, because for its time it was magnificent. Number 1. The Claas Jaguar 695 SL. And here it is. The number 1 machine on our list is, in hindsight, the most important forage harvester of the entire decade. And yet the specific models are barely remembered because they've been so completely overshadowed by what they created. The Claas Jaguar 695 SL and its 685 and 690 SL siblings. Claas launched these for the 1987 and 1988 seasons as a brand new generation of self-propelled foragers, and they were packed with the kind of thoughtful engineering that separates a good machine from a landmark one. The most obvious change was the cab. The SL family gave the driver a genuinely more comfortable, user-friendly place to spend a 14-hour day, and operator comfort in a machine like this isn't a luxury, it's productivity. Underneath, the real magic was in the chopping cylinder. Claas introduced new V-cutting cylinders with staggered bisected knives, an arrangement that gave a smoother, more uniform flow of crop and reduced the clamping forces on the accelerator. They increased cylinder speed and knife count to boost the flow. Engines in the range ran from 215 horsepower up to 354 horsepower, and the machines gained clever new headers for whole plant silage and ground ear maize. This was Claas methodically perfecting the recipe. Why does this matter so much? Because the Jaguar became the most successful forage harvester in the history of the world. The line that started back in 1973 built its 10,000th machine in 1994, its 20,000th by 2004, and its 40,000th by 2019. In some markets, the Jaguar has commanded well over half of all forage harvesters sold. Claas is the global market leader today, and the machines that laid the groundwork for that total domination were these SL foragers of the late 1980s. Everyone knows the modern Jaguar. Almost nobody remembers the 695 SL that made it possible. And that's exactly why it's the most brilliant, most quietly forgotten forage harvester of the 1980s. It didn't just survive the decade, it went on to conquer the entire industry. If you enjoyed this trip back through the golden age of silage, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next video.